Hi, I'm Chad Kopotic, Quality Control Manager here at Daring Banjos. I'm here to talk to you today about how to change strings on your banjo, make it sound better and bring it back to life. One of the most common questions I hear is how often should I change my strings? And that really comes down to how often you play. A professional musician will change his strings as often as 2-3 times a week, depending on how much he's playing. Someone who's just a hobby player playing at home can usually go about a month or more, depending on how often they're playing their banjo. The easiest way I like to tell whether or not it's time to change the strings is by taking my finger on one of the smooth unwound strings and running my fingers along it. It should feel nice and smooth and silky. If I feel it gritty or dirty, then I know it's definitely time to change my strings. Also, if you think your banjo isn't quite sounding as good as it did when it was new, as bright, as lively, it's definitely the first thing to do is change your strings. It'll breathe new life back into your banjo, make it a lot more fun to play. In order to change strings, you only need a few simple tools. First and most important is the pack of strings. A good pair of cutters, a string winder, a chromatic tuner, and a pencil. When you change your strings, it's important not to cut all the strings off the banjo at once. And that's because the bridge is not attached to anything. If you were to cut all the strings off, the bridge would fall off and you'd have to reset the intonation. It's where the pencil comes in handy. First thing we're going to do is mark around the feet on the head in a very light pencil mark. That way if the bridge does fall, we know where to put it back to. So I'll mark very softly just around the corner of the feet, and that'll give me a reference point once I'm done tuning. Make sure the bridge stays in the same location. After we're done marking our bridge, we can move on to changing the strings. I like to start with the third string, which is the middle string here. It tends to be the most difficult to fish through the tailpiece, so I like to get that one out of the way. First thing we're going to do is relieve tension from the string. Then we'll use our cutters, cut the string, gently unwind it from the tuner, and slide it through the tailpiece. You want to be careful when you're sliding it through the tailpiece that you don't scratch the head with the string. Take our replacement string, and I like to bend just a small hook in the end of it. Makes it easier to fish through the tailpiece. Go through the central hole, and that little hook allows me to grab it between the strings behind the bridge. Hook the loop onto the appropriate hook on the back of the tailpiece. Get it into the notch in the bridge. We're going to start it in the tuner. This is where I'll put a little tension using my fingers to hold tension on the string while I wind it through the tuner. That way I get a nice tight even wrap. We're going to let the slack of the string here go underneath my tension the first revolution. Once we get it around, we'll bend it up a little bit. This will allow the slack to push down on the rest of the string, creating a little tiny X crossover of the string here, and that locks the string into place to keep it from slipping. We want that string to go around the tuning post 2 to 3 full revolutions, and we'll get a little tension on it before we do a final tune-up once we change all of our strings. Take our cutters and as close as we can to that tuning post, clip the excess off, and move on to the next string. Now that we've gotten through all 4 strings, same as changing the third, we're going to move on to the 5th string, which requires a little different technique. We're going to do the same with hooking it into the right hook. Go underneath the tailpiece. Now we're going to go through the tuning post. Once through the tuning post, I'm going to put tension on it once again and start winding the string. First time, the slack is going to go underneath my string. And because I'm holding on to the edge, it pops the slack up, which is then going to put it over the string, creating that same X in the string. And that's going to again allow the string to stay in there nice and tight and not slip as you're tuning it. Once we get pretty close to full tension, I'm going to slide that string underneath that hook. Makes it a lot easier when there's no tension on the string. When we get it up to tension, I don't like just cutting the string off right here because it leaves a little bit of the string sticking out. And as you're playing, you can slide into it and it'll poke you. And nobody wants that to happen. So what I'm going to do is guide that string back through the tuning post, creating a little loop here. I'm going to pull that loop just to where it gets tight and then cut the excess off. And you saw that loop bounce back out, and that pulls the sharp burr into the middle of the tuning post, and there's nothing there for it to poke you as you play. And that's all the strings are changed, and now we'll move on to tuning it up. As you can hear, our strings aren't quite to pitch, so we need to use our tuner. I use a simple clip-on tuner. And we're going to bring all of our strings up to pitch, make sure we have it tuned up correctly. And you want to tune very slowly and gently, just so you don't go past the note and start breaking strings. And you want to go from string to string, slowly bringing them all up to pitch. Went a little past that one. Once I've gone through once, it's close, but it's still not quite. With new strings, you need to go through it 2 or 3 times before you start playing, just to make sure the strings get a little stretched out and they'll stay in tune a little bit longer. Now we're in tune, and we're ready to go on and check our intonation, make sure that's still set correctly. Now that our strings are to pitch, we're going to check and make sure our intonation is correct. Intonation is referring to the bridge placement. Since on a banjo, the bridge can move backwards and forwards, we need to make sure it hasn't moved and stays in the same spot. And that's so as you fret and play down your neck, all the notes stay in tune with each other. The way we're going to check that is by plucking the string at open. Make sure it's in tune. In this case it's D. At the 12th fret, we're going to play it again. And watching our tuner, make sure it plays the exact same note. It's just an octave higher. If it does not play the same note, if this note is a little sharp, that means our bridge is a little too close to the neck, and we need to move it back. But moving it back, we're not going to drag it along the head. We need to gently lift it and slide it back, very tiny increments at a time, until both notes read the exact same. And we're going to check on the 4th string the same way to make sure that each side of the bridge is where it needs to be. Alright, thanks for watching. That's how we change our strings. We want to change them one at a time. Make sure we don't move our bridge, and to do that we're going to mark around it. We're going to check our intonation, tune it up to pitch, and enjoy the new set of strings. For any further information or questions, contact us through daringbanjos.com, and we'll see you next time.